4 practices in, folks. I'm sure you're expecting some deep, important intel. Well, we'll do our best. Let's take that into consideration. Buckeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Best discussion, debate, and analysis on Ohio State football is right here. Please leave your comments and questions there in the chat. We do appreciate your contributions. We do understand that some of you can't contribute, but certainly if you can, we would appreciate your contributions here for Steve, Tony, and myself, and the contributions that they deliver for 310 shows. My goodness, Steve Hellwagon right next to me, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Hey, Steve.
Hey, what's going on?
Not too much. How you doing?
I'm hanging in there. We had I was on women's basketball watch this past weekend, and they beat Montana State and then lost last night to Tennessee, kind of predictably. Tennessee had the advantage in length and depth, and took full advantage of both those things, 182-67. So the season's over for the women. They did win 26 games, but second year in a row they hosted the first weekend and didn't get out to the Sweet 16. So that's certainly a little bit of a disappointment, but otherwise, pretty good year.
Now, back when I was covering women's basketball, I'm sure that this was more of a factor, but it sounds like it's still a factor that the teams that receive the home games aren't necessarily the best or the highest seeded or the teams that have earned it. There is a financial component where they believe they can draw a crowd.
Well, I think that the way it is set up now is that the top 4 seeds in each region get the opportunity to host, and I assume most of them take advantage of that. I don't know that anybody has turned it down here in recent years. So that's my understanding, is that if you're a top 4 seed, that that most of them are hosting the games on campus. Ohio State on Friday had the 3rd largest crowd of all the 8 sites on Friday. So they had about 7,000 people there both Friday and Sunday. So they did pretty well with it.
Tony's here just in time to break down like the box and one or the full court press,
yes,
whatever we need here.
I have seen about an hour total of college basketball over the last week or so. So
men's and women's.
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
I'm losing my love of college basketball because the teams are always different every year and players come and go like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah. They've killed it.
Yeah. I used to love college basketball. That's for sure. Appreciate you being here, folks. Voice of College Football, and comments, questions are welcome there in the chat. Tony Gerderman now jumping on Buckeye Weekly. That's the podcast. Check it out, of course, right here on YouTube and BuckeyeHuddle.com. So, Steve, we'll start with you as we were preparing for your rundown. We'll start with the head coach. I guess the guy's won a national championship. He should go first. Ryan Day and some of his thoughts after 4 practices. So I'm sure much is known about this team at this point.
Yeah, we got to see about an hour of the first 2 practices. Nothing on Friday may have been the 3rd practice, and today was the 4th practice. And they were in helmets today. They will go to full pads Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday this week. And that's when the rubber starts to hit the road. None of those are open for the media, though. So we won't be able to give you in-person reports from any of those. Wednesday is the pro day. They said that Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis will be busy helping out Emeka Egbuka catching passes from Will Howard. I mean, you send Emeka out for a pass pattern and Will Howard can throw 4 passes in a span of 30 seconds. Emeka Egbuka is only going to be able to catch 1 of them. So they got some other guys, running routes for him, which will be kind of cool. He was asked about Austin Sierreveld, who was a starter at some points last year, kind of got supplanted in the national championship last couple of games by Montgomery, and whether he could still be a starter at guard. And Coach Day said, I hope so. He's shown he has that look in his eye, and they're going to really do everything they can to get the best 5 offensive linemen on the field. So we'll see how that all develops. I know from watching Tegra Shabola At least those 2 days looked like he'd slimmed down just a little bit and kind of had that angular look a little bit more than that blobular look that we've kind of seen out of him before. So I think that's a positive development on the offensive line for both those guys if they're stepping up to go with Montgomery Hinsman in the 2 tackles that were brought in, Philip Daniels and Ethan Onianwa. Let's see. With Matt Patricia, he said he's shown a lot of energy. He's building relationships, and the feedback from the players has been good. His experience and credibility speaks for itself. The defensive end from the FCS ranks, Logan George, has been a good fit. Likes the way the offensive tackles are working with Tyler Bowen. Says that right now the plan is to actually have a spring game. They're calling it the spring showcase just so they have some wiggle room in case they have a bunch of injuries and can't put together a full squad to play an actual game. But my guess is you won't see people like Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs out there, but maybe more than a play or two just to have a cameo in that spring game because certainly you want them in bubble wrap and shipped to the season opener August 30th or whatever day it is against the University of Texas. So did confirm April 14 will be the trip to the White House. Quote, "It's an honor to be invited. It's a part of the celebration of our team." It said he grew up watching teams being honored at the White House, so there's no reason why this Ohio State team will not follow in that lead as well. So that was a lot of the high points, I thought. Perhaps Tony has more of what he heard and saw with Ryan Day. He always puts a positive spin on everything. And to me, it sounds like after 4 days, they're pretty happy with the progress.
Yeah, and another receiver who may be working with Pro Day is Bryson Rogers. I guess the draft eligible players can take part in helping out. Whereas before, I swear we saw Marvin Harrison doing this as a sophomore. But I was told earlier today that it's only draft eligible players who could if they're juniors or third-year players this year, then they can take part. So Bryson Rogers is scheduled to be another one of those guys out there. But it was interesting. I think somebody mentioned it after the fact, and I don't know that anybody asked Ryan Day about the quarterbacks, which gives you an idea of still how early it is and how everybody already knows the answers to all of the quarterback questions, that Ryan Day is going to give, where it's just, well, it's early and, they're all looking good, but all of the reps are even. So there's nothing going on there. Like in terms of a front runner or anything like that. The offensive line still continuing to build depth, like Steve said. If from the way Ryan Day talked, or from somebody I talked with earlier today, like they believe that Austin Searveld can be that left tackle, and being an Iron Buckeye over the offseason kind of solidifies his desire to do that. So he's embracing this opportunity while they still want to build depth on an offensive line and rotate, because it worked last year. So if it worked as well as it did last year, I wouldn't expect them to stop now if they have the opportunity to continue it. So who knows? Maybe it'll go beyond just guards rotating. Maybe they'll start rotating tackles as well. So the whole development of the offensive line is interesting. But depth was, I think, the topic du jour today, because they're looking at 16 games this season. So when we were talking with Brian Hartline, it's about building depth at receiver and everywhere else. You're talking to Matt Patricia. He's like, he has the ability to build more depth than he ever could at in the NFL, and to utilize that depth. So it sounds like he's having fun just seeing the way guys move right now, and seeing like I could see him doing this and I could see him doing that. So the spring gives him an opportunity to put guys in different positions and suss things out where because he's always talking about how like the defense, they just have so many long big bodies, and so that's exciting for a defensive coordinator to figure out where can we have those guys impact the offense most.
Has anybody talked to Matt Patricia and asked him about scheme, whether he's going to make big changes?
Yeah, not big changes, because as he said, he's learning as much as he's teaching right now, doing more learning than teaching, because he's got to figure out what they've got there. But he's the only new guy on the defensive staff. So what they'll do is they'll continue to do what they did last year. He'll bring in some of the things that he does, but it's not going to be a big change. Now, they were also evolving throughout the course of last season. It wasn't just a 4-down front by the end of the season. They did 3, they did 4, they did 5. So they did some versatile things, and I think that will continue. So maybe what you saw at the end, you'll see at the start, and then maybe by the middle of the season, the end of this season, you'll be seeing even more of the Matt Patricia thing. But you had the number 1 defense in the nation last year, and I get that a lot of that was because of the personnel, but it worked. And if you've got the guys that can still do it this year, don't change too much. But they need the guys that can do it, and that's up front. That's finding a nickel that can do what Jordan Hancock did, which is a tall order. That's finding somebody that can do what Lathan Ransom did, move from safety to safety, do whatever you needed, and always make the tackle, which those guys did kind of all season towards or at least the second half of the season last year.
Jackson, thank you for the contribution. Chiming in with this one. 159 days until the Ohio State-Texas rematch. August 30th. Let's get Ohio State at the Voice of College Football to 10,000 subs. So I checked. 8990. The team up north of 10,000. That should be some incentive for you Buckeye fans who want to win at everything. Got to win at everything. Get the subs up there. You're about 2,000 behind. Close to it. Something like that. Not acceptable. All right.
I thought it was interesting that Ryan Day also knows that today there's 159 days until the Texas game. So he's counting it down as well. And it sounds like that's a big focal point for the team so that they don't lose focus and they don't waste any of their days.
Has Ryan Day commented since the national championship or been asked about how he just may feel different coming to work every day?
Steve, what did you say last week?
Very relaxed, more relaxed than he was 2 months ago, and says you all understand exactly why, correct? And yeah, you got basically a lifetime deal now, bro. So yeah, Russell Bjork jumped right in there and got him all squared away. So yeah, it's all good.
But he wasn't extended. The contract was not extended, was it?
Yeah, he got extra years, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he got 2 extra years, I think, out of the deal, I believe.
Okay, and he's around high 9s, close to 10?
11 10. Now, I think.
Oh, is it 11?
Yeah. We're not messing around here. This is an 8-figure job. I mean, come on. Let's be honest. This is an 8-figure job,
This ain't intramurals, brother.
Yeah.
Well,
guys are a little bummed.
They pay Kirby 13 and they have to settle a lot of insurance policies too.
Oh my gosh.
On top of that.
The moving violations continue unabated.
Unabated. Yes. At some point, don't you hold the head coach accountable for any of that?
Well,
when it's up to 26?
Not when your major business partner is ESPN. I mean, or, even I don't know what it's like with the newspapers or websites down there, because from what I talked to somebody who is in Atlanta, and they tell me that the Athens PD is just out to get them. So, like, a lot of this is like, it's not even that big of a deal. It's just they've been targeted, and they keep getting caught. It's like, well, you can be targeted and keep getting caught and still not be in the right in all of this. And for so many of these, and I know this is a different era.
I mean, somebody died, didn't they? Somebody did die.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Correct.
I mean, do I have that correct? That someone did die as a result of this foolishness?
If this was 15 years ago at Ohio State, you'd have like Sports Illustrated and ESPN would be renting houses to investigate all of this. And each one of these is just kind of laughed off. And it feels like we talk about it more than, I don't know how much talking goes on the Georgia side of things, but you're either correcting it or you're allowing it. And he's certainly not correcting it.
I did a reenactment the other day of Georgia football players on the highway. Basically, this is what it looks like. This is Georgia football players as motorists against the Georgia public motorists on the highways there in the Peach State. They're just basically just slamming everybody left and right. knocking them off the highways,
Oh my gosh.
and then themselves too.
Well, how can the police department be out to get you? Are they manufacturing evidence? No, they're actually witnessing people driving 100 miles per hour. That's how's the police department out to, and they don't know who they're pulling over when they see that. They're just putting the lights on. Then they report the license plate, and it could come back to whoever. And how do they know who you are? I mean, the whole thing's ridiculous, just stupid, ridiculous.
Like one of my thoughts when this whole NIL thing was happening years ago is that people are going to die because of the cars that people are going to be buying, and they shouldn't be. They don't know how to drive them. I don't care. You should have them have whatever you want. They don't know how to drive them, and so that's going to cause some issues. And boy, it's amazing that keeps happening at Georgia, and it doesn't happen anywhere else like it does there. And is it there are two guys on the same night? Were they racing? I mean, there's been racing before, and they've talked about you're not allowing it, but until like you start kicking off good players of your team, then you're going to condone it. I always go back to one of Jim Tressel's old sayings that he got from his dad. Like the level of punishment is like equal to it involves how good the backup at that position is. Basically, If you've got a good backup, then you could really punish the guy. If you don't have a good backup, you might want to go a little easy. And that's an old coaching axiom. But if you got punishing people in the off season, that was one of those things where it's like, sure, they're running steps or whatever, or they're missing something or whatever. But if they're playing in all of the games, then they're not being punished. And if they're still on the team, then they're not being punished. At some point, there needs to be a line drawn, and it needs to be like although not like a starting line or a finish line. I don't want to encourage any more racing, but you need to maybe put a wall needs to be drawn so they can't even move forward. Because it's always like you just roll your eyes because yes, of course, Georgia, but we need to we have stopped rolling our eyes. But what are we doing? We can't do anything about it. It's up to Kirby. It's up to Kirby's bosses. What about them? We talk about Kirby, but what about the AD at Georgia? What's he doing about this?
The amount of discipline for the starter is commensurate to the quality of his backup.
Correct.
That was the standard. So there you go.
I found an article from last June or July where Kirby Smart said, well, we have enacted NIL penalties related to these incidents, and that is taking care of it. Use some type of phrasing like that. Well, no, it hasn't. And like you say, if you totaled up the entire rest of the country, because we all check our college football news updates every day, multiple times a day, how many times has this happened in the nation? Everyone else put together, I don't think has happened 26 times in 2 years. It's just nuts.
Did I see somebody tweet that they have more speeding arrests than wins over the last 2 years?
And that's how many times they've gotten caught.
Well, that's the only times they've actually sped. That. It's just unfortunate timing.
All right. Sorry to jump to conclusions. Shouldn't do that. So, yeah, I just think the time has come where I understand that football coaches are not expert at these sorts of things, but that's where you put on your CEO cap, and that's what you're paid when the conversation about how much Ryan Day's making. And then I thought instantly of Kirby Smart. And then this led me to this is, well, you're being paid at the level of a CEO. So act like a CEO and go reach out to people that are experts in these fields to deal with these situations. And otherwise, I think he's at the point where he needs to be fined and or suspended. If there's any more of this,
that's
going to do that to him.
Yeah. That's he's clearly okay with what he's been losing, and he's not losing anything. So that would be interesting if they start taking it out of his check. Would he be doing more then? Or if the NCAA removed it from Georgia, or whatever. Clearly what they're doing is not working, so you can't just keep doing the same thing. It's the old the Simpsons thing. We've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas.
Well, hopefully Brian Hartline has some ideas, but I guess they don't have to be any too much different from what's been done in the past. Is he adjusting to his new authority?
Yes, it seems like he's very confident in his skin now as the offensive coordinator once again, the job that he held in the 2023 season, although he wasn't the play caller. Now they are aiming for him to actually call the plays in 2025 after Chip Kelly did it this past year, and said he was surrounded with good people then, and is very happy that he is surrounded by good people now. So I think Tyler Bowen's going to be a big part of this, as we've talked about, as the offensive line coach and a former coordinator in his own right. And obviously to have Ryan Day there as well to assist with putting plans together and these kind of things. You can't go wrong. And as Ryan Day said, it's kind of like a 9-year track record now for recruits, transfers to understand that this is what the offense looks like. And these are the rules as he described it, and this is what it's going to look like. And so to me, I think the ball's just going to keep right on rolling. But, again, you kind of start to get that feeling tomorrow, when you're in full pads and the defense is in full pads and you're running plays and, you're probably not tackling to the ground, but, you're thudding up and this kind of thing and getting a feel for what is working and what isn't working and all these other things. So to me, it'd be neat to be a fly on the wall there tomorrow just to see who's really coming to the forefront when they're playing actual football. But I think this has got to be an exciting time. You'd say coming off of a championship that you'd have some complacency, but there are 2 new coordinators, several new assistant coaches, and 15 new starters. So nobody can afford to be complacent. You'll get left behind if you're complacent. So to me, I don't think the 2015 syndrome of, do we really have to do all this again? Really, do we have to do all this again? The grind, as Urban referred to it, may as well just called it the root canal because that's how they played it. But to me, it's kind of a fresh take on things, and so we'll see what direction it takes. And we'll get to talk to defensive linemen tomorrow after practice, and then I think linebackers and tight ends after practice on Thursday. The pro day is Wednesday. We'll see what kind of luminaries come around for that. So this is a big 3 or 4 days right here, and we'll see. Again, as we come out the other end of this, midway through spring football, how it looks.
We will take your comments and questions here at the Voice of College Football. Sam Williams-Dixon. So we talked running backs last week after you guys had spoken to the running backs and Carlos Lachlan as well. So there's so much comparison of the name Curtis Samuel comes up every time that Williams-Dixon's brought up. But is he of that caliber? Well, I guess it's kind of difficult to make that stretch. Curtis Samuel forged an NFL career for quite a few years. But, is there a path for him to be on the field significantly?
Well, right now he's probably he's battling to be the third running back with Bo Jackson. Like, those are the 2 guys right now in the running for that third running back. And the thing is, they don't necessarily need somebody that can be a slot receiver because they've got Brandon Innes and Bryson Rogers and Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate who can both move in there. So you have to be able to run the ball. As Carlos Lachlan said last week, you also have to be able to pass block. And so I think the comparison that people talk about, because that was the recruiting pitch, was we can throw you the ball, we can run the ball with you. I think if you just look at like what Travion Henderson did last year and what he's done throughout his career, I think that's a more apt comparison than a Curtis Samuel, because Curtis Samuel would line up in a slot. He played receiver. Travion Henderson only ever played running back, but he caught the ball a lot, and he caught it. He would catch you on wheel routes. He would screens. I think that's more in line with what you would see from Sam Williams-Dixon. So I think there's a long way to go. He wants to be here because he came back because he never said he never wanted to leave. So he's a year older. He's got a better relationship with Carlos Loughlin now. They're closer. So, he's closer to seeing the field, but he's also got some really good freshmen behind him that are going to be pushing him, and specifically Bo Jackson. So it's going to be a tough time. It's a tough battle for that third spot. And then if you are that third running back, that was James Peoples last year, and he carried the ball 49 times in 16 games. So there's not a lot of there for the third guy unless he's closer closer to the top two. And I think this year that third guy is closer to the top two than a year ago. So maybe there's more hope there to where it's like 120, and 120, like where guys can get 8 to 12 carries a game more than just two guys.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, because a lot of the talk right now has been about James Peoples. I did a big story on him yesterday about kind of being the heir apparent. And it's, not just one set of shoes. You've got 2 1,000-yard rushers that you need to replace with all that production, and whether it will be primarily Peoples with a little bit of CJ Donaldson mixed in, or whether it'll be an equal load for both those two guys, kind of like Henderson and Judkins had, or as you say, if a third guy can, neck his way in there as well, how great would that be to split it 3 ways? Although then you have the old, well, he's not getting into a groove. You really don't get into a groove until you get the 15th to 20th carries of the game is when you really kind of, get your groove and these kind of things. So I don't know. I'm open to whatever direction it comes out, as long as they can establish the run, and if they need 2 yards, can they go out and get 3 or 4 yards? That's the question that you really have to come back to, is when you need to be able to run the football, can you do it? When you're in the 4-minute drill, can you whittle the clock down to 30 seconds? Can you take all the air out of the ball? And that's what's going to be important for Ohio State running the football this fall.
Voice of College Football on Instagram. Check it out, folks. Our buddies Patrick and Gabe are running the social media, and they're doing a heck of a job with all sorts of interesting posts, breaking news, rankings, that sort of thing. That's on Instagram, Voice of College Football. Out of all these players that you guys have talked to, which would only, I guess, be 2 position units to date, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Bad question, Mark. I guess we got to wait for all of them. I just didn't know if there was a guy that you guys have come across that you thought, okay, this guy's a little different this year, or he's got a chip on his shoulder, or something to that degree.
I think Lincoln Keenos is a completely different person than we've talked to before, because, and I've said this on, I don't know if I said it on this show, but maybe on my own podcast, but when you've talked to these guys before, when you talk to like a freshman or even a second-year guy, you can just hear like nerves in their voice. There's some wavering in their voice. Like, he's got none of that anymore. And that's, when we've talked to him in the past, it's just, not necessarily sure of everything he's saying, but like now Lincoln Keenos has no issues. And even talking with Julian Sayin in January to now, different kind of guy. The winter that you spend being a leader through the weight room and of the team, and having to talk to coaches and having to talk to teammates, like, then talking to media is nothing, almost nothing at that point. But you still do. I mean, you've seen it over the years where even established starters don't necessarily like talking to reporters, but as the quarterbacks, you're going to be talking to everybody, and you've seen these guys become, like, more forceful when they're speaking. Even Tavian St. Clair, in a little bit that I got to listen to him, like, he doesn't sound like a typical true freshman, but he's been talking with reporters for years now as well. And when you're in the Ohio State sphere, you're not just talking to 1 or 2, you're talking to a bunch of reporters. So he's grown up early in that regard too. So I think those 3 guys, and it's, I don't know how important it is. It's one of the things I wanted to ask Ryan Day, but he was in a hurry today, is, how important is it for these guys to be, as confident as they are, not just with the plays, but with everything else, because like, these are 2 different guys than I've seen previously at Ohio State at quarterback. So that's good.
Yeah, I think you made a good point on Keenholz. I thought Tavian St. Clair was very impressive. I really didn't listen in much on Julian Sayin. I want to go back and kind of reread what's going on, and that type of thing. So I don't know. To me, again, this is a new frontier for all these guys, and they have to stand the test of time. And that's stacking one great practice on top of another. And we'll see how they're able to do that.
If you can't watch us, folks, you can listen to us. Catch the audio of Ohio State live on your favorite audio platform, specifically Apple, Amazon, Spotify. Those are the big ones, but we've got a few other ones floating out there. Again, your favorite audio platform for Buckeyes Live. And again, Instagram, I'm telling you, if you're on Instagram, you'll be impressed with what gets posted there multiple times per day on our Voice of College Football network. And I believe we will at some point in the show, if not right now, toward the end, we'll take one call. So the call-in line is right there if you'd like to call and chat with Steve and with Tony. I know you guys aren't big into the recruiting, but I just thought I'd throw out a few notes here because there's a slew of guys. Obviously, you guys know better than I do, but it caught my attention. Bo Bentley, quarterback, 7th ranked out of the 247, whether the composite or the 247 listings, but LSU, Georgia, Florida State were surrounding his visit to Columbus. And Zayden Krempin out of Texas is an offensive tackle. He's there right now as we speak. And Jackson Cantwell is the #1 player out of, folks, if you don't follow recruiting, you would never guess it, out of Missouri.
Yep, Midwest.
#1 player in the country at offensive tackle as well.
And I think they've done a great job recruiting him. I know that after he won the national championship, I think Cantwell was the first player that Ryan Day flew to go see because he understands how big of a priority it is to get a 5-star offensive lineman like Jackson Cantwell. So, and he said he loved his visit to Ohio State, and we'll see what direction that one takes. The press conference is done in the team meeting room there at Ohio State, the practice facility, and they were hustling us out of there. First of all, Coach Day, they tell us theoretically it'll be around 11, whatever time. Well, he didn't come in till close to 12, and I think that was because he was meeting with recruits after practice. And so he comes in at 12, then we get Hartline and Patricia, and when that's done, they're like, hey, you guys need to get your stuff and get the hell out because they're having a recruiting meeting in here, and we're going out one door, and the recruits are going in the other door, and there was like 20 of them. And I'm telling you, these guys look good on the hoof, whoever they were. They were, some studs going in there. It must be spring break at a lot of high schools that produce great football players because there were a lot of guys at today's practice and coming in for a recruiting meeting there at whatever time, 1 o'clock when we vacated the room. So, yeah, it was. This is when Mark Pantoni and his guys are earning their money, is getting these guys on campus. And people will say it's been a little bit of a slow start to recruiting for Ohio State 2026. I think it's about to pick up. I don't know if they're going to get a bunch of commitments this weekend or anything like that, but they are definitely in front of a ton of top players.
Yeah, I mean, the whole process after the championship game is catching up. You're playing catch up the entire time, whether it's recruiting, whether it's the portal, whether it's off-season workouts, getting ready for spring. But yeah, it was interesting. So on the indoor today, you had former Buckeyes getting ready for pro day, like Emeka Ibuka and some others were out there running around and stretching and getting ready for a workout. And you've got this line of recruits like walking in front of him, like you've got the past, you've got the future. And then, the present had just gotten off the practice field as well. So it was a bit of a madhouse there at the Woody. And then I think last week, Bo Bentley's visit was maybe one of the reasons why Billy Fessler was about 30 minutes late or 20 minutes late to his interview. So they're playing catch up. But the problem, Mark, is they're doing it on my time. And that's what I cannot have that. I've got places to be. Come on. You got enough hours in the day.
Wait for Ryan Day. I mean, are you kidding me? 59 minutes? Are you kidding me?
Can't have it. Won't have it.
No.
Never again.
I tried to fall asleep 7 different times and couldn't.
It's too loud.
Yeah.
I will definitely accommodate for you guys, but man, you guys are asking for a lot for us to be, switching around the show every week, but I'll do it for you guys. But my goodness,
Hopefully we can
Ryan Day,
settle in
who's
after
he to
this.
expect that?
Yeah.
Hopefully we can settle in after this week.
No, you are good. You are good. Anytime I can get you guys, I will take it. We've got 5 commits right now, and it brings to mind, since you guys did mention Brian Hartline, and of course heard from him today. They're in a good position. It's one of those good issues to have potentially, in that, well, here you've got the top recruiter in the nation, but he's got a more expanded role in the X's and O's. How much do you pull him away from recruiting, if at all, or how does that balance out?
Oh, he's still involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he talked about the balance of it all today, and just mostly the OC and the wide receivers coach part. But you're not going to take him away. You're not going to take one of his strengths away. And I think one of the reasons you make him OC is one of the reasons Ryan Day did it, is because now, he even said it, now Brian Hartline isn't just coaching the receivers, like he's coaching the entire offense. So now he's not just recruiting the receivers, he's recruiting the entire offense, which you would hope would help, because he still does have the NFL pedigree and things like that. But I still think they're either going to have to really truly convince somebody like a Jackson Cantwell without really any proof of concept, because Tyler Bowen is new. So you can't just lean on Tyler Bowen's, recruiting and his production and his development in the past, because he hasn't coached a position since 2017. So then it has to become about the Ohio State wanting to be a Buckeye, wanting to be part of that culture, or they're going to pay as much as anybody else and go the NIL route, which is not normally something they will do for a prospect. That, like, they're not going to convince you with the money. Like, if you don't want to be here, then, but you would if the price is right. That's not really what they're looking for. So they want somebody that wants to be here, then they can hook them up. But it's one then the other. It's not, we'll give you all of this, and now are you interested? Because you need to be interested for real, and then they'll go from there. So it will be interesting to see what they can do on the offensive line. I thought, Justin Fry did a good job with the tackles last year, but he's gone. So now you're like, well, what can Tyler Bowen do with Austin Seerveld, who was a guard last year for the most part, and if he makes them into a left tackle, now you're cooking. So there's some opportunities for, as Ryan Day and Urban Meyer would say, for testimony over theory, but they don't have any testimony yet on the offensive line. So I think that's going to take some time, for at least out of state top guys, because that's never been something that they've ever really cleaned up on consistently year to year.
Mika is asking about the wide receiver rotation. We appreciate the question. So I was about to say, with losing so many, well, it's really Emeka Egbuka is the loss, but 2 established guys behind him, and they like to play 4 for sure. So how do we see that playing? But yeah, the line is pretty well stacked behind the top 2.
Yeah, I think that depends on, like, if a Bryson Rogers or one or more of these freshmen like Quincy Porter are ready. And if they're ready to play, then I see no reason why they wouldn't play 5 or 6. I think the top 4 are pretty established. And I can't tell you, is Ennis going to start, or is Mylan Graham going to start? Are they going to, each start half the games, or how's that going to look? I can tell you that Tate and Smith obviously are the 1 and 2, but you've got 4 that are pretty established, and then from there, I guess we'll just have to see how it all shakes out. But Bryson Rogers, as a veteran now, or at least a guy that's been around a couple of years, is a guy that could push for just a little bit more playing time, and we'll see how that goes.
This is one of the questions that I wanted to ask of Ryan Day and Brian Hartline today, but we get one question and you got to go, because I do think last year was the first year since Ryan Day got to Ohio State that you only had 3 receivers play more than 200 snaps. And, in previous years it had been 4 or 5 or 6. And last year it was just Jeremiah Smith, the Mecca, and Carnell Tate, which when it's those 3, you can understand why you're not going to put another receiver in for them for much of the game. This year, however, I think you'll see more. Now, does it mean 4 or 5 or 6 like it was back in 2016, 2017, 2018? I don't think so, because back then all of the receivers are kind of the same. Like they're all, there wasn't a lot of delineation between the receivers, whereas now the older the guys get, they're NFL ready, and compared to the younger guys who are very, very good, but they're not NFL ready. And so the standard is much higher to play, whereas before maybe it wasn't as high. So now you've got to get that standard up for everybody. And Brian Hartline said it today, that you can judge your room by how good the freshmen are, and he really likes this group. But I do think, I asked him about Brandon Ennis, and he started talking about him and Bryson Rogers. Somebody asked him about Quincy Porter, and he started talking about all of the freshmen. So he's not really interested in singling anybody out right now, which I think is a good thing, because, you ask him about this one person, he'll talk about it, but also say this guy also, because when you ask about the slot, it's Brandon Ennis and it's Bryson Rogers. And Ennis only played about 30 more snaps over the course of 16 games than Rogers did last year. So I think he's going to play, but I do think it'll be Ennis as your starter and then Rogers as your backup in the slot. It's just, Mylan Graham continues to do good things. He'll be Carnell Tate's backup, and that's how I view it. And then that backup behind Jeremiah Smith at the X. I mean, it could be Quincy Porter as a true freshman, because that's his position. He's got the size and he's got the ability. So I don't know that they're going to play 6 guys, 200 snaps, but I do think they'll get 4 or 5 in there.
So the Ennis Rogers stat you just gave surprised me, and I just checked the numbers, because obviously we saw Ennis with the ball in his hands more, 14 catches compared to 5.
Yeah, I'm just looking real quick. So it was like 195 snaps last year for Ennis and 163 for Rogers. And they were the 4th and 5th receivers last year, so you would think they would just all kind of move up. But yeah, the production, he's only gotten a couple of catches in his career, Rogers, but he's a guy that always shines in practice. They talked about him a year or 2 ago, where his target completion percentage was up there with Michael Thomas back when he was practicing at Ohio State. So when you throw him the ball, he catches it, and he beats his man, and he makes a play. So that eventually will translate to the field. It's just the amount of opportunities I think are going to be difficult, because, and this is what I asked Brian Hartline today about, was when you're moving Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate into the slot, how does that, what do you need to see from Brandon Ennis? How does that impact him? He's like, it doesn't impact him, but it does, because it takes him off the field at times. And so when you're taking that guy off the field, even though he will need to play outside at times, so they're working with him on that. But that slot receiver is going to come off the field at times when they're moving Carnell Tate or Jeremiah Smith into the slot, or that slot guy is also going to come off the field when they're playing 2 tight ends. And they're going to play 2 tight ends a lot, because they like Will Kazmarek on the end, and you went and got Max Clare for a reason, so he's going to play a lot. So whenever you've got 2 tight ends on the field, your slot receiver is back on the sideline. So that's going to be that limits the number of snaps for that position right out of the gate.
We've got a Buckeyes primetime show on Mondays and Thursdays. That's at 8 Eastern. Check it out. So keep it right here at the Voice of College Football on your Ohio State channel. And we go Mondays and Thursdays at 8 Eastern. So, Tony, what's going on at Buckeye Huddle these days?
I wrote about Carlos Loughlin today and what he's seeing from the running backs. So you can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But you're going to have to scroll down the page, because we've got updates from Ryan Day and Brian Hartline and Matt Patricia there as well. And so we'll have some stories coming from everything they said there at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
When was the latest podcast released?
I think Thursday or Friday, talking about stuff we saw last week. Or talking about some thoughts that I had over the course of the first week of practice and what I'd seen and what I'd heard. So you can find that. That's the most recent episode, the Buckeye Weekly podcast.
All right, Steve, what's the good word for you?
We're just trying to stay on top of all the interviews. I think we've done a pretty good job so far of sharing stories and interviews from the practices. And last week we had pictures and videos, which were kind of cool, I think, for a lot of people to take them there to the practice field. This week, obviously, we've got a couple of interview days as well as the pro day on Wednesday. And, a lot of guys that really need to have a good pro day on Wednesday to move up and improve their draft stock. So should be a really fun week. And again, as we said, Coach Day has talked about how he's hoping that the spring showcase is actually more of a scrimmage or a game type situation. Last year, I think it was just offense versus defense for a number of plays. And if they're able to do something similar to that, that would be tremendous, obviously, for the rank and file Buckeye fan who have a difficulty getting there in the fall, but obviously a little more of an opportunity to get your hands on tickets for the spring showcase. And again, that's coming up 2 weeks from this Saturday. I think April the 12th is the date for that. So it's coming up here before we know it. And, so far 4 practices in, 11 to go. And we're going to do everything we can to stay on top of it.
According to our guy, Rusty, Steve, you're actually doing some decent work.
Uh-oh. What did I do?
Rusty says Steve's column summarizing the hoop season was very good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, it's just kind of like you got to pick the right players. And, we only have 4 guys on a roster that the other team has to defend. That you're not going to win very many games doing that. And they only won 17 of them. So they've got to get some stuff figured out and get some NIL help and go get the right players. This is Diebler gets a do-over, but I think if he doesn't make the tournament after his second year, I think that's going to be a tough one to come back from. So we'll see.
Well, Steve, I think the last coach that missed the tournament 2 years in a row that didn't get fired was Randy Ayers.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no doubt.
Do or die
at the end of his run, right?
Right.
Yeah,
the end. Yeah.
He went like 5 years before they fired him, and then O'Brien missed it in his first year at 98 as well because there was no team there. But then Scooney became eligible, and it was milk and honey from there. So yeah, it was all good.
Yugoslavian milk and honey.
Yes.
Yeah. Looked like Randy Ayers was going to be something for a
Boy,
while.
oh boy.
Helps to have Jimmy Jackson.
Yeah.
Well, folks, you can see me in just a couple hours if you care to. I'll take your calls. You can actually contribute to the conversation, but that's Monday through Fridays on the main channel for Eastern. We're also going to get an Alabama spring football update, and we'll talk about the next coach who may break through in the national championship ranks, whether that's Dan Lanning, Sark, take your pick. Also, the fine folks at Corn Nation on SB Nation invited me to show up tonight to talk about my book, Disputed National Champion. So you can catch that on the Corn Nation podcast right here on YouTube at, I believe, 9 Eastern tonight. All right, folks. Tony, Steve, as always, we don't do this without you. So thanks for making it roll, and we will see you next week.
Yep.